Welcome to the first installment of Rapid Fire Reviews. Today we'll be taking a look at one of my latest purchases, the Bandai Movie Monster Series GMK Godzilla. This 2025 release is essentially a downscaled reissue of their 8-inch mold from 2001, and it still looks just as good as it did back then. Plus, this newer figure is much more affordable and way easier to obtain. The paint job is basic but good all around. It's more than enough to help the details pop. The face especially looks fierce, probably my favorite aspect of this figure. Godzilla has 4 points of articulation. Both the arms and legs can fully rotate. The tag included with the figure has a decent profile shot of the GMK Goji suit used in the film. Not the picture I would have used personally, but fine nevertheless. I'll give this guy a 5 out of 5. I really like this figure a lot, and if you're a fan of the GMK design for the Big G, then I would highly recommend it. It resembles the suit very well, and for the price in question, what's not to love? You get what you pay for and then some. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for tomorrow's next installment of Rapid Fire Reviews. On today's installment of Rapid Fire Reviews, we'll be looking at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Super Mechagodzilla. I'm genuinely surprised it took Bandai until 2023 to add this guy to the line, let alone with a whole new mold. I've always been fond of this version of the character. While far from being the best looking one out of the many variations, I like how it mirrors the bulky Heisei Godzilla in terms of looks. The details here are pretty good, like how the Mega Buster is visible on this figure, although I do wish it stuck out more. A lot of that can be attributed to the paint job, which is pretty lacking here. This mold is also a bit too short when standing next to a Godzilla figure, which is a bit of a bummer. Mechagodzilla also has a whopping 5 points of articulation. The arms, head, and even the maser cannons of the Doc Garuda can fully rotate. The tag here has a solid picture of the suit in question, but it constantly reminds me of how much better the Mega Buster could have looked on this figure itself. Overall, I'll give the Movie Monster Series Super Mechagodzilla a 3 out of 5. The figure doesn't stand out too much, but it's acceptable for what it is. Now give us a Movie Monster Series poster version, Bandai. Thanks for joining me today, and tune back in tomorrow for another entry of Rapid Fire Reviews. For today's edition of Rapid Fire Reviews, we'll be showcasing the Bandai Movie Monster Series Baragon from 1965's Frankenstein vs. Baragon, also known as Frankenstein Conquers the World. They sure did pick a fine picture to put on the tag. Shows this version of Baragon in all of his glory. The figure does a fine job of representing the suit too. Detailing here is very good. They really nailed that cutesy face of his. Aw, isn't he adorable? To put it bluntly, the paint job here is simplistic. I feel they could have added more highlights to certain areas like the ridges on his back, but hey, at least it looks like Baragon. In terms of articulation, Baragon has 4 points. The arms and legs all fully rotate, although the legs can be a bit stiff at times. This figure of Baragon gets a 4 out of 5 from yours truly. It's great to see this guy join the standard Movie Monster Series figure line, and hopefully one day Frankenstein will do the same. Thanks for watching, and look out for tomorrow's newest installment of Rapid Fire Reviews. Welcome back to another Rapid Fire Review. Today we'll be looking at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Ebirah. When the Movie Monster Series toy line started to gain traction again years ago, one of their main initiatives was to create just about every single kaiju from the Godzilla series. They certainly weren't lying, and Ebirah was one of the finest examples of that. This Ebirah was released in 2023 and has a very vibrant red paint job with some hints or perhaps minor splotches of black coloring here and there. The mold itself is fairly detailed too, so that coloring method definitely benefits here. The articulation is limited to 2 points. Only the arms can move, and not fully. But what else is to be expected from a kaiju we only partially see in his 1966 film? The tag has quite possibly one of the more amusing pictures I've seen of Ebirah. Looks like he's in a zero-gravity room. Makes sense though. Here you see a full body shot of the giant crustacean. I'm gonna give this guy a 3.5 out of 5. Maybe a bit generous on my part, but it's a solid looking figure for a fair price too. Thanks for joining me once more, and be on the lookout for the next entry of Rapid Fire Reviews. This time on Rapid Fire Reviews, we'll be looking at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Gorosaurus. This guy was actually the winner of a poll the Godzilla store launched online as to who fans would want to see join the Movie Monster Series line next, which is great because the more lesser known Toho Kaiju the better. Gorosaurus first appeared in 1967's King Kong Escapes and would also appear in Destroy All Monsters 1 year later. This figure certainly captures the essence of the suit. The details pop out well enough, and the paint job hits all the right points you'd expect it to. It's exactly how one would envision Gorosaurus in action figure form. It reminds me a lot of Bandai's previous 8-inch mold of the character released in 1993, although I can't confirm nor deny if they are one and the same. He has 5 points of articulation. Both the arms, legs, and even the tail can fully rotate. My only gripe here is that, like Super Mechagodzilla, he's on the short side. He is practically dwarfed by every other Movie Monster Series figure in my collection. Makes Gorosaurus look like a minifig rather than a member of the same toy line. I'll give this guy a 3.5 out of 5. Everything about this figure is good, but man, I wish the scale was a bit better. Thanks for joining me once again, and stay tuned tomorrow for another edition of Rapid Fire Reviews. Welcome back to Rapid Fire Reviews. Today we'll be looking at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Godzilla from 1989's Godzilla vs. Biollante. I've been waiting for this version of Godzilla to join this toy line for quite some time. When it comes to the Heisei incarnation of the Big G, this is the one I always think of. I mean, just look at the picture on the tag. It's an iconic silhouette for the character. This figure truly embodies it. However, I'd like to point out that this figure does reuse many assets from the mold Bandai already had for their 91 Godzilla, but with changes to the chest and the head sculpt. That may bother some, but not me. Both designs practically mirror one another, so it shouldn't surprise anyone that they took this shortcut. Plus, the Biogoji comes with the Super X2 as an accessory. Who doesn't love that? These vinyl figures coming with a little accessory like that is something Bandai should have been doing years ago, and it's great to see that they're going to start doing more of these going forward. The paint job is solid, and I like what they did with the eyes here. Godzilla has 4 points of articulation. Both arms can move side to side and each leg can rotate fully, but be cautious as the arms get in the way and could potentially cause paint scuffs. I'll give this version of Godzilla a 4.5 out of 5. The mold's a spot-on representation of this design, and it looks pretty damn good next to this rose form Biollante. Watch out for tomorrow's Rapid Fire review to hear my thoughts on her. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode of Rapid Fire Reviews. On today's installment of Rapid Fire Reviews, we'll be looking at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Rose Form Biollante. This version of Biollante was Godzilla's first real kaiju adversary of the Heisei series, which is funny when you consider it's just an oversized flower. But this version of Biollante was able to hold her own against the nuclear Leviathan. However, judging by the image on the tag, things didn't last too long for her. The figure in question has a pretty good mold. It really captures that floral look of the character, and I even like how they went as far as to sculpt the teeth inside the rose petals. You could probably see them better if the paint job was more vibrant, but the paint serves its purpose here and gets all the major coloring points in check. Biollante has an odd number of 3 articulation points. The vine arms and a single leaf arm can swivel back and forth. Overall, the rose form Biollante gets a 3 out of 5 from me. It's a great addition to anyone's collection, but aside from the looks alone, it will mainly serve as a fancy paperweight. But that's not a bad thing.
That's a good thing.
Thank you all for watching, and be on the lookout for tomorrow's entry of Rapid Fire Reviews. This time on Rapid Fire Reviews, we'll be showcasing the Bandai Movie Monster Series Gamera from 1995's Gamera, Guardian of the Universe. This design of Gamera was my first introduction to the character, so I've always held a bias towards this look. Even if he's the friendliest looking Gamera from the Heisei series, the 95 design feels like the best way you'd want to modernize the Showa incarnation. Unlike the other Toho Kaiju in this toy line currently, the tag here is very unique and sports its own layout. There's of course a profile shot of the suit, but the addition of the film's poster artwork is a huge plus in my book. Bandai also really nailed the way Gamera looks in the film with this sculpt. The paint job and details here are also top of the line. This may be the best Gamera figure I own simply due to that fact alone. This figure also has 5 points of articulation. Both arms, legs, and even the tail can completely rotate, even if they can be a bit stiff at times. I'm going to give this Gamera a solid 4.5 out of 5. Without question, this may in fact be one of the best Gamera figures in the entire Movie Monster Series line. Considering this is one of the few Gamera figures I own, this one is truly a gem in my collection. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for tomorrow's newest entry of Rapid Fire Reviews. Today on Rapid Fire Reviews, we'll be looking at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Mothra from 1992's Godzilla vs. Mothra. This version of Mothra on film quite literally looks like a giant fluffy butterfly plush toy, and does this figure capture that? Well, kind of. Right off the bat, the details are certainly present here, but the paint job's only applied in a few areas, so it's hard to appreciate any of it. I mean, take a look at it for yourself. And don't even get me started about the underside of this figure. No effort put in on the paint here whatsoever. Her wings should look like this, not like this. Even the tag manages to properly display that factoid better. But at least in profile this figure looks like Mothra, so that's a positive note. Now you may be wondering, just how many articulation points does this Mothra have? Well, let's see, and... oh, wait, that's right. There are none! How wonderful. I'm going to have to give this Mothra figure a 2.5 out of 5. The mold itself is acceptable, but unfortunately the lack of paint and articulation severely hurts what could potentially be a good figure. Thank you all for watching and stay tuned for tomorrow's next installment of Rapid Fire Reviews. For today's edition of Rapid Fire Reviews, we'll be taking a look at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Megalon from 1973's Godzilla vs. Megalon. Megalon has always been a favorite of mine, but for the longest time, the only figures available for this big bug were the original 8-inch Bandai release from 1989 and the YMSF figures. Thankfully, Bandai fixed that when they made this guy available in 2021. The details on him are solid, many of Megalon's traits are featured here, but the paint job is pretty minimalistic. I wish there was more coloring on the wings and such. Megalon has 5 points of articulation. The head can rotate completely, the arms and legs can too, however I personally try to avoid doing so due to potential paint scuffing. The tag on this figure showcases a very good full body shot of the suit used in the film. Mine is slightly damaged as you can see here, but that kind of thing can happen over time. Overall, this figure gets a 3 out of 5 from yours truly. It's a fine figure that you can still grab, with various releases to choose from now. He looks especially good next to the 1973 Godzilla here. Be on the lookout for my thoughts on that figure tomorrow. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next entry of Rapid Fire Reviews. Welcome to the newest installment of Rapid Fire Reviews. Today we'll be looking at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Godzilla from 1973's Godzilla vs. Megalon. It really did take a long time for this version of Godzilla to join this specific toy line, but I imagine a lot of that had to do with the fact that Bandai already had a mold in place for the 74 and 75 incarnation of the Big G, so reissuing those saved them time from having to make a new mold. But I'm just guesstimating at this point. I love this image of Godzilla that's on the tag. It's just iconic. Makes me want to beat the crap out of a giant drill arm beetle with a tree too. The details here are very good. It looks very much like the suit in question. The paint here is solid too, although the copper coloring on the nails and toes is an interesting choice to say the least. Also, I wish Godzilla had his crazy eyes like he does in the film, but that's just a tiny nitpick on my end. I couldn't even imagine what it'd be like having to paint that. Godzilla also has 4 points of articulation. Both the arms and legs can completely rotate. Unfortunately though, unlike his 74 and 75 counterpart, his head does not rotate. I'm going to give this version of Godzilla a 4 out of 5. A solid figure all around, and it would definitely be a great addition to anyone's collection. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for tomorrow's next entry of Rapid Fire Reviews. On today's installment of Rapid Fire Reviews, we'll be showcasing the Bandai Movie Monster Series Varan. Varan made his first appearance in 1958's Giant Monster Varan and would make a small cameo 10 years later in Destroy All Monsters. Varan doesn't get nearly as much attention as other Toho Kaiju, almost as if he's the black sheep of the bunch. But this figure definitely got a lot of love. The mold here is great. It captures the look of the suit almost flawlessly. Even the back plating has the bumpy peanut shell texture to it. My favorite aspect has to be the face and head sculpt though. The paint job here is pretty good too. Nothing too glamorous, but it looks close enough to the original shade of the suit and flying prop, so you can't really be upset with that, especially when it comes to a black and white film. Varan has 4 points of articulation. Both arms and legs can rotate all around, but the flaps on the back can get in the way, so you gotta be real careful with it. I'll give this figure a 3.5 out of 5. The mold is great and it greatly resembles Varan, so what more could you ask for? Thank you for watching and stay tuned for tomorrow's next episode of Rapid Fire Reviews. On today's edition of Rapid Fire Reviews, we'll be showcasing the Bandai Movie Monster Series Godzilla from 1955's Godzilla Raids Again. This specific Godzilla design has gotten quite a bit of attention over the years, and it's usually attached to sinister things on the internet. But this is the first time this mold has been released in the main Movie Monster Series line, before it was exclusive to just box sets. There's also a big improvement for this reissue when compared to the Memorial Box version. The dorsal fins are actually in the correct order. Good on you, Bandai! The tag highlights the Osaka battle between Godzilla and Anguirus, although I feel it should focus more on the 55 Godzilla suit. The sculpt is pretty good, however the paint here is average. It has more of a gray hue than the previous figure had, but I'm not too pleased with the painted teeth here. It just being a white line with little detail on them makes this design appear more dopey. Godzilla has the standard 4 points of articulation. Both arms and legs rotate fully. I'll give this guy a 3.5 out of 5. The mold is good, but the paint applications leave a lot to be desired. But at least he fits in with the 55 Anguirus. To hear my thoughts on him, come back to the channel tomorrow. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next entry of Rapid Fire Reviews. Welcome back to another installment of Rapid Fire Reviews. Today we'll be showcasing the Bandai Movie Monster Series Anguirus from 1955's Godzilla Raids Again. Having the first iteration of this character is awesome, especially after being teased by Bandai America's unreleased mold back in 2005.
Oh, we were right there, man!
But perhaps it was worth the wait because the sculpt is superb. It's a lot more accurate to the film suit than it is inaccurate. I like how Anguirus is looking upwards, because that's exactly how he is consistently posed throughout the film's runtime. The paint job here is solid all around, and it makes those sharp details look so much better. Although the coloring of the back plates and tail could be a tad bit better if you ask me. Anguirus has 5 points of articulation. Both arms can rotate completely, the legs can partially move but are unable to go past the arms. The tail can also spin all the way around. The tag has a good profile shot of Anguirus from the film, and he's riding solo unlike the one that came with the 55 Godzilla. I'll give this figure a 4.5 out of 5. Without question, this is the best Anguirus in the Movie Monster Series toy line, and if you haven't picked him up yet, I'd highly recommend you do so. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for tomorrow's next entry of Rapid Fire Reviews. Today on Rapid Fire Reviews, we'll be looking at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Manda from 2004's Godzilla Final Wars. Manda first appeared in 1963's Aggregate, where he fought the Gotengo and would also play a part in 1968's Destroy All Monsters. And, of course, he appeared briefly in Final Wars. The sculpt here is okay. It does resemble the film prop, even if it does appear more on the chunky side. But if I'm being honest though, this thing is just a glorified stick. I think he would have stood out more if they had his body in a twirl or something. The paint job is fairly average too. Nothing very grand, and there are some spots where the coloring cuts off entirely, which is a bit disappointing. I will say though, this figure does have a single point of articulation. The head and neck area, whatever you want to call it, can spin all around. That's still one more than the 92 Mothra. Would have been nice if they gave this guy movable arms and legs though. The tag has a shot of Manda wrapped around the Gotengo once more, and as you can see, I spent $22 on this thing. $22. That was money well spent. I might as well have shoved this figure up my ass. Overall, I'll give the Final Wars Manda a 2.5 out of 5. An okay attempt, but some more articulation would have highly benefited this figure. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for tomorrow's next installment of Rapid Fire Reviews. On today's edition of Rapid Fire Reviews, we'll be looking at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Minilla, or Minya, or Baby Godzilla, whichever you prefer. I typically use Minya, but I'll stick with Minilla for this review. This figure is mainly based on his appearance in Son of Godzilla, and it looks just like the little guy. This is practically a spot-on representation of the character. I mean, just look at the tag. It resembles the suit to a T, which is more than I could say for Bandai's original 1991 release. Plus, just look at him next to the 67 Godzilla. Need I say more? The paint job here is solid. The figure primarily sports a gray color with some tan shading here and there. Some of that tannish coloring also makes its way on the claws, toes, and even the sculpted teeth. Minilla has 5 points of articulation. Both of the arms, legs, and even the head can completely rotate. I'm going to give this Minilla figure a 4 out of 5. Whether you're a fan of the character or not, this is a great figure and you would be remiss to not have one in your collection. After all, how often do they actually make figures of this little guy? Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for tomorrow's next installment of Rapid Fire Reviews. Welcome to another installment of Rapid Fire Reviews. Today we'll be looking at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Godzilla from 1994's Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. This incarnation of Godzilla is the one you'll typically see on most merch or virtually anything related to the Heisei era, which makes sense since this Godzilla was the poster boy for Toho throughout the late 90s and early 2000s. If you take a quick look at the tag, you'll even recognize this photo for yourself. This Godzilla was everywhere at one point. The figure does represent that design well enough. Everything on it looks fine, but I can't quite get over the shape of the face. It looks like he has a snub nose, or maybe he was stung by a bunch of bees. But on the upside, the paint job here is great. Every detail is painted very well, from the eyes, the claws, and even every individual dorsal fin all the way down to the tip of the tail. Godzilla has the standard 4 points of articulation. The arms can both swivel side to side, and the legs can rotate all the way around. They do rub against the arms though, so you gotta be gentle when moving them. I'll give this figure a 3.5 out of 5. It's a good Godzilla figure and would look good in anyone's collection, especially if you're a Heisei fanatic. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for tomorrow's next entry of Rapid Fire Reviews. On today's edition of Rapid Fire Reviews, we'll be showcasing the Bandai Movie Monster Series Aggregate Destoroyah from 1995's Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. This form of Destoroyah appears a couple of times throughout the 1995 film, however most people associate this character with the final perfect form. But I knew I had to get this figure once it was announced, because this is such a unique look for a Godzilla adversary. The sculpt here is great. All the primary details are present throughout the mold. The paint job is fine, nothing spectacular, but it gets the job done. Although I find it to be very off-putting that the legs are a completely different shade of red than the body itself. The articulation, however, is pretty nutty for a Movie Monster Series figure. This Destoroyah has a whopping 12 points of articulation. The front claws can swivel around, 6 of the legs can spin around, the 2 spear appendages can rotate fully, and both the head and tail can completely rotate. Now that's the most I've seen on one of these figures so far. The tag looks good too. It has a nice shot of this design in action. I'm going to have to give the Aggregate Destoroyah a 4 out of 5. It's a solid figure all around and would look great next to any Godzilla figure in your collection. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for tomorrow's next installment of Rapid Fire Reviews. Welcome back to another entry of Rapid Fire Reviews. Today we'll be taking a look at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Kamacuras. Kamacuras first officially appeared in 1967's Son of Godzilla and would go on to appear again in All Monsters Attack and Godzilla Final Wars. This Kamacuras is also one of the 5 figures that came with the Dream 5 box set that was released in 2024, which I have in my possession. This figure looks pretty good. The mold looks very much like the film prop that was used in Son of Godzilla. The paint job is basic, but Kamacuras also wasn't very colorful anyway, so I'll give it a pass. Kamacuras has 3 points of articulation. Both claw arms can swivel side by side, and the head can fully rotate. Kind of a shame the legs can't move around though. Speaking of shame, this figure does not come with a tag. None of the Dream 5 box set figures do. That was certainly a weird choice. Even the Memorial Box figures had tags come with them. But now I guess if you buy them separately, they come with one. What an odd decision to make. I'll give this figure a 3 out of 5. It's a fine figure with the details in the sculpt taking center stage. Join me again tomorrow where I'll be looking at another figure from the Dream 5 box set. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next entry of Rapid Fire Reviews. For today's installment of Rapid Fire Reviews, we'll be looking at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Anguirus from 1972's Godzilla vs. Gigan. This new mold of the Showa Anguirus was one of the 5 figures released in the Bandai Dream 5 box set released in 2024, and just like the other 4 figures, this guy did not come with a tag. What a bummer. The sculpt here is very good though, even if it does feel like your typical quadrupedal kaiju figure by Bandai. The paint job, however, is a bit strange. Everything is painted well, but the color choice here is a bit bizarre. Like, shouldn't the horns and backplates be the same color? Instead, the back and claws look like a grayish beige while the head horns are brown. I don't know why, but it just doesn't look right to me. Maybe I'm being a bit too OCD here. Anguirus has 5 points of articulation. All 4 legs can rotate completely, but can rub against the backplate, so do be cautious. The tail can also spin around. I'll give this Anguirus a 3.5 out of 5. The new mold looks great and the articulation is good, but I'm still unsure about the paint applications on it. Tune in tomorrow to hear my thoughts on another figure from the Dream 5 box set. Thanks for watching and be on the lookout for the next episode of Rapid Fire Reviews. Welcome back to another edition of Rapid Fire Reviews. This time we'll be looking at the Bandai Movie Monster Series King Ghidorah from 1964's Ghidorah, the 3-headed monster. Out of all the characters included in the Dream 5 box set, this was the one I was the most excited for. It was truly baffling how long it took Bandai to make a proper Showa King Ghidorah in this toy line. But does it live up to my own expectations? Partially. See, when you get this figure, you think you'll be getting this. Yet what you end up with is this. Not bad by any means, but the wings were entirely folded back inward instead of being outward, which was a bit of an annoyance to try and fix. Fortunately, the sculpt itself looks pretty spot on to this incarnation of Ghidorah. The paint job is average though. The gold is enough to help this figure pop, and the red eyes are neat, but the main hair color feels sloppily applied and doesn't look all that good. King Ghidorah only has 2 points of articulation. The legs can move all the way around. They really should have given articulation to the necks or heads. Also, no tag was included yet again. Thanks, Bandai. Overall, this figure gets a 3 out of 5. I'm very happy to have this Ghidorah in my collection, but I feel a tad bit more could have been done with it. Only 2 figures left from this set, so be sure to come back and hear my thoughts tomorrow on the next one. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next entry of Rapid Fire Reviews. On today's edition of Rapid Fire Reviews, we'll be looking at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Gabara from 1969's All Monsters Attack. This guy is the primary kaiju antagonist in one of the most infamous Godzilla films made by Toho. Some people hate it, while others don't. I'll save my opinion on the film for another day. But this figure of Gabara definitely looks the part. He's fairly detailed and the paint job covers all the important areas that it should. Even the hair on his head is painted well. A fine representation of the character in figure form. However, my main complaint is that Gabara has a measly 2 articulation points. Only the arms can fully move around. Feels too limited for a character with 2 functioning legs. Also, I can even see there's a glue seal on the waist, so why not let that swivel some? And to top it all off, the figure doesn't come with a tag. Just thought I would mention that for the millionth time. But before we conclude, I would be remiss if I didn't compare him with my YMSF Gabara. They each have their own pros and cons, but both figures are solid all around. Let me know in the comments section which figure you feel is better. Overall, this Gabara gets a 3.5 out of 5 for me. The mold's good and the paint job's even better, but the lack of articulation really holds this guy back some. Only one more Dream 5 box set figure left, so come back tomorrow to hear my thoughts on it. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for tomorrow's next entry of Rapid Fire Reviews. Welcome back to another edition of Rapid Fire Reviews. Today we'll be showcasing the Bandai Movie Monster Series Mechagodzilla from 1974's Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. Ah yes, the final figure from the Dream 5 box set, and honestly, you can't go wrong with the OG Mecha-G. This version of the robotic doppelganger is iconic, but unfortunately the figure feels very bare bones compared to what Bandai has given us before. Let me explain. The previous show of Mechagodzilla released in this toy line was great. It was painted well, had good articulation, and the sculpt looked just like the suit used in Terror of Mechagodzilla. Now for this one, Bandai decided to create a whole new mold. While the sculpt itself is fine, Mechagodzilla now feels a bit too scrawny. It's even more noticeable when he's standing next to the 74 Godzilla. He just looks way too tiny. But hey, who am I to talk? The paint job is fine, nothing too special, but it gets the job done. Now the articulation is at its bare minimum here, because Mechagodzilla only has 2 movable parts. Only the arms can fully rotate. This is a bit inexcusable if you ask me, because the previous show of Mechagodzilla had a movable head and legs, but this one can't? Come on now. I'll give this figure a 2.5 out of 5. It looks just like the show of Mechagodzilla, but with all of its shortcomings, it's hard for me to rank this figure any higher. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for tomorrow's next entry of Rapid Fire Reviews. On this Christmas Eve edition of Rapid Fire Reviews, we'll be looking at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Bagan. While the original mold was based on the model created for Godzilla Movie Studio Tour, this repaint is aimed more towards his appearance in 1993's Super Godzilla for the SNES. I made a whole video discussing the origins of Bagan, so feel free to check it out if you'd like to find out more about this character. But for now, the figure itself looks very good. It almost entirely replicates Minoru Yoshida's sculpture to a T. The details are more prominent with the first release though, since that one was designed with the original color scheme in mind. The SNES design is more simplistic with its paint job, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. The darker colors do make this version of Bagan look pretty imposing. He kinda gives off Destoroyah vibes. Bagan has 4 points of articulation. Both of the arms and legs can rotate fully, but do be careful as other body parts can get in the way. The tag looks good as well, although I wish it had the SNES sprite of Bagan on there instead, but I understand why they did it this way. I'll give this guy a 4 out of 5. A very cool piece to have in one's collection, and I would highly recommend getting one yourself. Thanks for watching and be on the lookout for tomorrow's next installment of Rapid Fire Reviews. Merry Christmas everyone, and welcome back to another installment of Rapid Fire Reviews. Today we'll be showcasing the Bandai Movie Monster Series Super Godzilla. For those of you unaware, this figure is based on Godzilla's powered-up form in the 1993 SNES game titled Super Godzilla. This form of Godzilla would go on to inspire the design used for Space Godzilla a year later too. I had mentioned this in a prior video discussing the game's final boss Bagan, but I do find it fairly funny and ironic that this figure is basically just a restructured mold of the Movie Monster Series Space Godzilla. Talk about a full circle moment. I never really cared for the look of that Space Godzilla. I don't know why, he just looks strange to me. Thankfully a new mold of him will be coming out in the near future. Maybe they'll also rework that one into a Super Godzilla figure someday. But back on topic, this Super Godzilla looks fine for what it is. The details are there and the colors are spot on, so everything looks good on that front. This Super Godzilla also has 4 points of articulation. The arms can swivel side to side and both the head and tail can fully rotate. The tag looks fine until you see the picture. I understood what they were trying to go for, but why not have the game sprite for Super Godzilla here instead? Regardless, this guy gets a 3.5 out of 5 from yours truly. The inner kid in me is happy to know that this guy even exists, and hopefully we see more like it down the line. Thank you all for watching, happy holidays, and stay tuned for tomorrow's next entry of Rapid Fire Reviews. Welcome to another edition of Rapid Fire Reviews. Today we'll be showcasing the Bandai Movie Monster Series 1954 Godzilla. Now some of you may take a glance at this figure and wonder, why does he look this way? And the reason for that is very simple. This figure is based on the original film's prototype model that was used as a basis for how the suit should look. It even appears on a lot of the movie's promotional material. I will say, elements of this design are pretty unsettling and the figure captures them pretty well here. The mold and paint job are pretty good, although I do wish the claws and toes were the same color as the dorsal fins. But either way, this is almost an exact replica of that prototype. The white eyes and mushroom-shaped head are pretty creepy, especially with how the teeth look too. This little guy has 4 points of articulation. Both the arms and legs can completely rotate. The tag is neat too. It looks like Bandai was trying to recreate a promotional image this model was a part of. A solid effort. I'm going to give this Godzilla a 4.5 out of 5. Without question, one of the more unique and creative Godzilla figures in this toy line, and you should totally snatch one up. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for tomorrow's next entry of Rapid Fire Reviews. This time on Rapid Fire Reviews, we'll be looking at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Battra. Battra made his one and only film appearance in 1992's Godzilla vs. Mothra, and the character is basically an evil Mothra. The design of the character is cool, but does this figure convey that well enough? Not necessarily. See, the sculpt itself is fine and I have no real complaints there. However, the problems begin to appear when looking at the paint job. It isn't horrible per se, despite some details being left uncolored, but like the 92 Mothra figure, it has one glaring issue. The underside of the wings are barely painted. Like, come on now, you mean to tell me you could paint the top of the wings but not the bottom? You can even see where the paint is missing here. Inexcusable. It also has one other thing in common with the 92 Mothra. Can you guess what it is? That's right, 0 articulation points! They really are the perfect pair. I'm giving this figure a 2.5 out of 5. Like Mothra, it had potential to be good, but not nearly enough effort was put in to fully capitalize on it. Plus, would it kill them to add some movable parts? Thanks for watching, and be on the lookout for tomorrow's next entry of Rapid Fire Reviews. On today's episode of Rapid Fire Reviews, we'll be looking at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Titanosaurus. Titanosaurus' first and only film appearance was in 1975's Terror of Mechagodzilla, which is a shame because this is a really neat design for a kaiju. As a collector, I'm glad to know that Titano has gotten this much love in figure form. The mold is great and accurately represents the overall look of the creature from the film. You can probably get that feeling just by looking at the tag alone. The details are very prominent here, and a lot of that has to do with this colorful design. The paint job is a bit darker here than the actual film suit though, which is funny because the original release's paint back in the early 2000s was spot on, or at least that's how I feel. Fortunately, I own both, but my other figure is currently in storage, so I'm unable to have it here at the moment. Titanosaurus has 5 points of articulation. Both arms, both legs, and even the head can fully rotate around. I'll give this figure a 4 out of 5. Without a doubt, one of my favorite figures from this line, and any kind of Titanosaurus representation is a huge plus. And for the price in question, having this figure is a no-brainer. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for tomorrow's next entry of Rapid Fire Reviews. Today on Rapid Fire Reviews, we'll be showcasing the Bandai Movie Monster Series Hedorah. Now, this version of Hedorah is based on his bipedal walking form from 1971's Godzilla vs. Hedorah, specifically the scene where Hedorah first makes landfall in search of more pollution. And I have to say, I think I prefer this guy over the standard version Bandai has put out over the years. The sculpt here is spot on in my eyes. It looks just like the picture that's on the tag itself. Although not as vibrant with the color scheme, what we get here is acceptable enough. There's a bit of a yellow hue to help this guy stand out some, plus those hypnotic red eyes certainly make an impression. Far out, man. Hedorah has 3 points of articulation. The arms and tail can all rotate completely, but do be careful as parts of the body's mold can get in the way at times. I'll give this Hedorah a solid 3.5 out of 5. The mold looks very good and the articulation actually surprised me some. If you're a Hedorah fan, I would highly recommend you get this figure. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for tomorrow's next installment of Rapid Fire Reviews. Welcome back to another installment of Rapid Fire Reviews. Today we'll be showcasing the Bandai Movie Monster Series Godzilla from the Academy Award-winning 2023 film Godzilla -1. I could go on and gush about -1 forever, but I'm on a time restraint. I would rather focus that energy into talking about this figure here. And yes, it looks just like the Godzilla in the movie, which is great because this Godzilla was a straight-up menace. The details on this sculpt look good. I'm pretty fond of the spiked dorsal fins and his mean scowl too, which leads right into the paint job. And while at first glance it isn't much to gawk at, there are some good applications here. The teeth are very well painted and I like the yellow-orange color of the eyes. Plus they even painted on the scar detail here from the boat chase in the film, which is a fabulous addition to this figure. The entire body is a charcoal gray while the front has some tannish shading on the chest, arms, and legs. Speaking of, Godzilla has 4 points of articulation. Both arms and legs can fully rotate. I'm giving this guy a 4 out of 5. This is a great representation of the -1 Godzilla and would be a great addition to anyone's figure collection, Godzilla fan or not. Thank you all for watching. Only one more day to go, so stay tuned tomorrow for the final rapid fire review of 2025. Welcome to the final rapid fire review of 2025. Today we'll be looking at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Cybot Godzilla from 1984's The Return of Godzilla. We started off the year on this channel covering the 1985 American version of this film, so we might as well close it off by covering this guy. And this is yet another case of Bandai creating something truly special. Godzilla 84 has always had two distinctive looks, the suit and the Cybot. The Cybot was a 16-foot tall animatronic used throughout the film mainly for close-up shots of the face, as the entire body itself wasn't very mobile. They both share many similarities, but there are enough minor differences to warrant this version getting its own figure. For one, the body proportions are very wonky, which is accurate to how the animatronic looks in virtually every photo taken of it. The face is more wide-eyed and expressive when compared to the film suit, and the dorsal fins don't nearly line up as much with the actual design we're used to. Suffice to say, the sculpt captures these details well enough. The paint job is simplistic, but what else would you expect from this version of Godzilla? Godzilla has 5 articulation points. Both of the arms, the legs, and the head can all fully rotate. I'll be giving this guy a 4.5 out of 5. It's a fantastic representation of the Cybot Godzilla, and I cannot wait for the poster variant to come out. The rating could have been much higher, but man, I got spoiled by that X Plus for the 20 minutes I got to hold it. Damn you, Slashy. As if cursing me wasn't enough. Thank you all for tuning into these 31 days of rapid fire reviews. I hope everybody has a happy new year, and until next time, take care everyone. I'll see you down the road.